Hi, welcome. For today's episode, we're going to be getting the boat ready to go back in the water. We need to do some bottom paint. So like any other paint job, the separation is in the preparation. And the better prep work you do, the longer your paint's going to last and adhere to the boat better. So I've already pressure washed, got all the growth off from when we pulled it out of the water. Taped off my water line, not for a paint line, but just because I don't want to scratch up the gel coat while I'm sanding the bottom of the boat. Need to do a visual inspection of the boat after you've pressure washed it, looking for any blisters on the hull. Blisters are just what they sound like. It'll be a bump on the hull. That means your fiberglass has gotten moisture in it and starting to delaminate. If you got any blisters, you're going to need to sand it all down, get the bare fiberglass, repaint gel coat, and then do another coat of bottom paint and primer. But my paint's pretty good. There's no blisters down the hull, so all I really got to do is get some of these loose paint and the crazing there, sand it down, clean off the rest of the growth. Okay, now we're safe and ready to go. You can see how we smoothed away from the edges, gotten the rough part off. We're down to the gel coat here, so we're gonna have to get some primer and primer over all top of these holes before we put another coat of bottom paint on. So just do this all the way down the hull. So, nice and smooth, chip paint feathered off. We're gonna put a coat of primer on top of the bare stuff, let that dry, and then put some paint on when we're all done sanding. Gonna go back over it with some thinner. We'll show you all that in a video going forward, but that's prep part one. See what I mean by feathering right here? So you're taking it down from the surface, next layer down, so you've got no jagged edges like you have here. If you just sanded that down and didn't get rid of those jagged edges by feathering it out like this, that's going to transfer to your paint on the surface when you're all done. And that's where the marine organisms are going to want to grow, because they got a little edge right there that they can get their teeth into and sink in. So the smoother you can get it, the better your paint's going to adhere, and the smoother surface you have discourages the little critters from growing there in the first place. So if you just leave it like that, yeah, you sanded and roughed up the paint, and you can't feel it. I can't even with my gloves, but there's still little pits there, and there's still little sharp edges in the paint, and that's where the things are going to grab a hold of, because there's a little ridge, and then you're done. So just smooth it out so you've got no sharp edges anymore and a nice smooth surface for the paint to grab onto. All right, so we got the boat all sanded, feathered out, ready for primer. So it's painting day. Get your tools all together. So we're gonna use a couple different kind of rollers. Little easy chip brushes to throw away when you're done with. Rags, paint thinner. The bottom paint is heavy and it's hard to mix. And my can's been sitting on the shelf for a bit. So highly recommend getting a drill and a mixer. Trying to mix the bottom paint with that, you're gonna wear yourself out. We're gonna be using Pettit HRT unipoxy paint today. This is what they call a hybrid ablative paint or a hybrid bottom paint. There's two different kinds you can use. Boats that are in the water all year round for season after season, you're gonna wanna use an ablative or what they call a soft sloughing paint. That keeps the growth off of your boat by falling off over the year, over the seasons, and taking the marine growth that's attached to it with it, as well as some biocide and some reactions to keep the growth from going there in the first place. But that's the soft paint. I keep my boat on a trailer for part of the year, in the water for part of the year. So a hybrid paint works for me because this paint has all the biocide, has the hybrid reactive technology, which is basically a film that works its way to the surface that makes it taste bad, and the organisms won't grow on there in the first place. And then the ones that do, it will slough off a little bit throughout the year. But since we pull the boat up on the trailer, the soft sloughing paint, you know, when you got it up in the air, it starts to powder. And every time you walk by the boat, you'll get the paint all over you, or when you pressure wash it to get it cleaned, it all comes off. So the harder paint have a smoother surface, can be trailered, launched on and off the trailer as many times as you want, run the boat up on the beach, all of that. Because it's a harder paint, it's going to last through that and still keep the growth off the boat while you're in the water. Pettit paint, HRT, unipoxy, it's going to ship to you. These nice little clips on there, keep it from opening up while it's in transit. And we'll wrap it all up in plastic wrap to you. Easy to take off with a high-tech tool like that. Okay. Cruise at low speed. That was starting to look interesting. It's going to take a while, so we'll do the rest of that off camera.
Now you can go.
Need a bottom paint primer, not just any kind of house primer. This is some stuff I had left over from another job, so I'm just going to use it. That one doesn't have all the stuff in it, so mix it the regular way. Need a trash can. All right, so we sanded and painted yesterday, and then we pressure washed. Get all the dust off. So we need to go prime the bare spots so the bottom paint has something to grip to besides the gel coat. I'm going to go ahead and do this now so it can set up and dry while we're mixing our paint. Don't be afraid to put it on kind of thick. It's okay if it covers your existing bottom paint. Make sure you get in all them little areas and nooks and crannies. And we'll go back to the stern so you guys can see it a little better. Get one of the little people to go under the boat and do that part. Just make sure you work it in through all those edges that you feathered out. And then after this dries, we'll go back and hit it with some sandpaper real quick just to smooth it all out, get rid of the brush strokes. Just like we talked about, those uneven surfaces are what the little critters really love to dig their teeth into. Where'd our crew go?
Sitting on the steps.
Okay, we're gonna finish painting the rest of the primer spots, and we'll be back when it's time to start putting bottom paint on. See you in a bit. Okay, don't need to soak it. Get a little thinner on a rag, disposable rag. These are gonna be garbage after you're done. Be careful how you dispose of them. Make sure you put them in a bag by themselves with no other flammable materials. Seal it tight. Wet them down good. They will spontaneously combust if you leave them in the garage, so get rid of them right away. Don't have to soak it. Just getting the last of the dust and dirt and everything off. And we want to use paint thinner because the paint thinner actually helps reactivate the paint that's already there, which helps it bond better when you put the new paint on.
Go.
So one of the first things you need to figure out before you paint the bottom of the boat so you can order the paint is how much square footage of hull surface you need to cover with your paint product. Measuring square footage on a boat is not the easiest thing in the world to do because you got so many angles and curves, but you can estimate fairly easily. We're just gonna figure out what our water line is. So 25-foot tape measure, just barely long enough. So we're looking at right about 25 feet, 24 and a half, but for estimation purposes, as long as it's better to overestimate than under. So 25 feet of water line. Feet up to the keel, up to the edge. So let's call it 6 feet. Easy math, 25 times 6, 120, 30, 150 feet times 2 sides, 300 feet. Let's add another 50 for the transom. So I probably need about 350 square feet of paint coverage.
Okay.
Okay, we're all set. Wiped it down with thinner. Everything's sanded. Boat's ready for paint. I know some of us don't like to do it, but before you put the paint down, even before you stir it, read the instructions. There's some good information in there, like how much square footage the paint can will cover, what temperature range you need to be painting in, 40 to 80 degrees, up to 100, but who wants to paint in 100-degree weather? It's a little cold today. The colder and wetter it is, the longer it's going to take your paint to dry. All those things apply, whether you need to thin it for brushing, whether you need to thin it for spraying, if you're spraying it on, all that good stuff. And try to be careful when you pour your paint into your trays that you don't pour the paint over the instructions for later dates. I don't want to get my nice LFS shirt all painted on, so I'm going to change. This paint isn't the best stuff in the world to get on your skin. I advise against it if you can. Got the crew in paper suits. They're the ones got to crawl up under the boat. But I'm the fat old captain, so I'm just going to stay on the side and the outside. Did a nice little test spot. We're supposed to do that in an unobservable place and out of the way of the place. Stupid dog. Like underneath the boat. But we wanted to be able to see it for the video, so we'll test spot. Everything looks good. I don't hate the color. We might paint it next coat, but paint all adhered, so we're good to go. HRT, hybrid reactive technology paint. It's most effective at the waterline. The areas where sunlight's going to strike the boat, going to get the most growth right up here. So they recommend that you do extra coats on the waterline. So what we're going to do is 3 coats on the waterline for every coat on the bottom. So I'm going to paint a coat on the waterline. We're going to let that dry. Use a smooth roller, not one with a lot of nap. Foam rollers work. Sure, some of you might be seeing my tape line thinking it's a little off, but I left that little green stripe there on purpose since I'm changing colors of the bottom paint. If I'd have taped over the black, then I'd have had a pinstripe of a different color going down. I didn't want that, so we just extended the bottom line up a little bit so that it's blue instead of a black pinstripe there that nobody wanted to see. 2 thin coats is always better than 1 thick coat. So put it on the cover. We're gonna let this dry while we paint the bottom of the boat. We'll put another coat on as we paint that coat on. And then once that dries, we'll put another coat over on the top of that. So you got 3 coats along the waterline for every coat that covers the hull. Let's get to it. Got almost everything covered. A few little details to go here. It's about 50, 60 degrees, 55, 60 degrees right now. So the instructions say drying time between coats about 6 hours. Hopefully the sun's gonna come out here and speed that up for us so we can get the other coat on today, but now we just gotta sit and watch the paint dry. Lucky sun came out, paint's all dried. Just gonna walk around, inspect the paint job for the first coat, see if there's anything paint runs, rough spots we might want to smooth down, give a little more prep. Like that big runny goopies right there. Hard to get spot. But we don't need the big old bump there. We want a nice smooth jump. Paint looks nice and tight. We got some good even coverage. So our prep work paid off. We got a good first coat down. Let's get a second coat on it, and then we can move on to the next job. Waiting for that to dry. Just take the little bit of extra paint you got in your roller and your brush and your pen. Let's just get that on the sides. It's already dried enough to get a little bit of an extra coat on there. We don't have enough paint left over to do a whole nother job, so we're gonna clean up this paint to do a whole nother coat. Clean up this paint. We're gonna let this dry on the water line because remember we wanted a few extra coats there. Then we're gonna use the rest of the extra paint we got. We got enough to probably do the keel one more time, get another coat on there, and another coat or 2 on the water line, and we'll be good to go. One of the really nice things about this paint, the HRT, and most of the hybrid paints, is there's no minimum dry time or no minimum time till you gotta launch the boat. With some of the ablative paints, You have to get the boat in the water within 24 or 48 hours of after painting it. We can get the boat all painted. Doesn't matter when we launch it. It's good for up to a year. Now back to watching paint dry.